review site. So this is Whom Do I Love When I Love Myself? The Challenge of Narcissism by Joseph Rivera in Philosophies. So, yeah, this is published in January of 2025, so it's a new thing. And as always, feel free to ask me questions. I'm reading this myself for the first time, just to try and figure out why did someone spend all this time to write something and get it published, because believe me, it takes a lot of fucking time and effort to write philosophy and then get it published. Huge problem on its own. So yeah, but I'm not endorsing this. We're just trying to see what they had to say, if they had anything worthwhile to say. Let's see. Headline. Doger says headlines that end in a question mark. The answer is always no. Is self-love identical to self-absorption and narcissism? Yeah, no. Okay. Betteridge's Law? Yeah. Lumen says surviving the R&R cycle, torture. Yeah, Lumens, I don't know if you heard, but I actually got a paperback after two major changes requested. I got a minor revisions requested. So I'm expecting that one at least might get published. I'm very excited. So very good. Don't know. We're still waiting, but like, I'm quite hopeful about that one. Anyway, is self-love just really self-absorption? Okay, I hope you like it. That one's on disagreement. All right, Time Magazine published a not-so-uncritical column on the popular self-help movement known as self-love. It suggests that self-love as a therapeutic strategy, one formulated repeatedly in accessible guides to authenticity and self-discovery, confines the self within itself. The outcome is a toxic form of possessive individualism that reimagines our journey of self-discovery as a venturing forth to the other solely for the sake of self-satisfaction, or simply put, what philosophers call solipsism. As such, it puts the conditions in place for the magazine's column's key insight, namely that self-love does not genuinely connect with, but instead uses the other, and it thereby contributes to the widespread Western phenomenon of loneliness. So sad. By the same token, a fortiori academic literature in the discipline of philosophy and elsewhere agrees that self-love can lead to a disturbing fixation on one's own self. You're going to give it some grace? I appreciate that, Sock now. Viper says, are we talking about solipsism again, or is it just you? It's always just you, Vipers, always. Harry Frankfurt's The Reasons of Love show that Kant determined self-love to be at risk of consumptive indulgence, what he named the dear self. Precious self is more accurate in English, perhaps. In self-love, my ego, quote, craves merely that its impulses and desires be gratified. In other words, it craves that it be indulged, end quote. Eric Fromm's classic The Art of Loving warns that self-love can appear to furnish a self-alternative to love of neighbor for, quote, the degree to which I love myself, I do not love others, and that self-love is the same as selfishness, end quote. Viper says, I'm never going to stop telling that joke because it makes me smile every time. Hey, indulge, Vipers, indulge. Jean-Luc Marion's The Erotic Phenomenon formulates the problem in striking psychological imagery. When I love myself, I really lie to myself. For only a, quote, happy idiot, end quote, would be capable of such a superficial act of bad faith like self-love, which encourages self-absorption that ignores the inner complexity of our relationship with the other. The one who is happy is handsome, rich, unlucky, charmed, quote, someone for whom everything turns out well, without any merit, difficulty, or failure either. Such, end quote, and such a life is easy to love or become self-absorbed in. But what about the rest of us who dispel that illusion of perfection and thus wrestle with vice and failure, not least with our capacity to hurt and abuse others? Imbecile Hero is my middle name. There you go, Dojo. That's kind of fun. K-Par says, oh, this kind of reminds me of Rousseau's amour propre and amour de soi distinction. I do not remember my Rousseau on this, so let me know what that is. I'm not so surprised, because this is really giving me existentialist, anti-authenticity, Luminance is here. So I'm getting hardcore authenticity vibes off this paper. So what am I doing? I'm being inauthentic to myself. So and that goes back to, Rousseau, sincerity. What is it to be authentic or sincere to yourself? So it's yeah. Why, thank you, Volt. How you doing? Marion is pretty cool. Phenomenologist at University of Chicago. There you go. Cool. Capar says more Dessois is a natural instinctive desire for self-preservation, while more proper is a social comparative form of self-love that arises seeking recognition and esteem from others. Yeah, so so you've got like the natural versus the social there, and that's a good distinction in this area. I usually default to the natural versus the conventional, which is not too far from like the social. So yeah, and if you're getting wrapped up in all the conventions, that's not good, because that's going to stray very far away from what you need. So, like what it is to actually live a decent life. So, let me see if I can zoom in. Yeah. Okay. Some recent cognitive science appears to align with such philosophical sentiments. Judson Brewer's book, The Craving Mind, indicates neuroscientific research on the chemical structure of the reward centers of the brain appear to encourage a particularly narcissistic explanation of love. This is especially the case in a romantic context, but not always. Here, love appears as selfish self-love in that it involves not so much consideration of the other's welfare and happiness, but in reality, the satisfaction of the brain's addiction centers that entail physiological cravings induced by drugs like, among others, heroin and cocaine. The physical pains we may feel when a lover is absent, my craving for you, chat, reveals dopamine deprivation, nothing more. What I miss about you, one may conclude in the wake of Brewer's analysis, may well feel like the presence of you as a person and our connection. As if extending the critique of solipsism, Brewer demonstrates that the craving for the other instead brings into focus the satisfaction and relief my brain undergoes once I receive a hit from my romantic partner. What I miss then is myself, or the selfish feeling of having my chemical needs met. Self-love involves me and only my satisfactions, not theirs or even ours. Okay. Stare dad. Dojo says, I'm not like them, but I can pretend the sun goes gone. Oh, is this a song? Yeah. Okay, there we go. Maybe it's happy. I can't sing. I was like, I was going to start breaking into that one, but yeah. I think I'm done. Maybe it's happy. Frank says, I'm not sure it says anything. It's not saying anything yet. This is all just sort of introduction. Luminous says, it's all just chemistry, yeah. Yeah. No, nothing's been said yet. Yeah, I don't care what you think unless it's about me. Yeah, well, Kurt was probably very arrogant, but yes. Yeah, nothing's gotten said yet. They're just, this is all just window dressing to get started. Self-love leads to hedonism. Yeah, well, what's so bad about hedonism, Dojo? Okay. Yeah, and Frank, guess what? Next line. Now we're going to start. How might the present article defend self-love? So they were just giving some factoids before. Now they're starting. Must we abandon self-love as a philosophical category? Shall we break the spell of its being a healthy form of self-esteem, a more proper... and here we go, like exactly as what was said by Capar, is a more proper in French, by exposing it as a toxic command that carries with it an inescapable accusation of gross absorption in my own ego. Is it ultimately a form of utilitarianism in which I use the other to meet my chemical needs, or if I insist that I do love myself, does it in reality amount to bad faith in which I lie to myself about what emotional state I am concealing, that is, my narcissism? And this is what I was saying about the existentialists, about the bad faith. So... I think we're all coming at this from, different angles. Great emote potential. Oh, interesting. Yeah. I should probably get more emotes. I've not, I keep adding more things to do this summer, and I don't know if I'm going to get to all of them. Okay, the lesson to be learned in the Narcissist myth outlined in Ovid's Metamorphoses, entitled The Story of Echo and Narcissus, lies not in timeless aesthetic of the story, but in the utter clarity with which it illuminates the tragedy of self-love gone wrong, which reveals the logic of vanity. As the narrative unfolds, it becomes clear that Narcissus rejects and dismisses the advances of Echo's love, who in turn curses Narcissus to not win over the creature whom he loves. After witnessing his own image in the pool, Narcissus falls in love with himself, for he looks in wonder, charmed by himself, spellbound, and no more moving than any marble statue. The loved becomes the lover. He could not predictably appropriate the fleeting image of himself, but neither could he turn away for fear directed at the prospect that the image would disappear. Narcissus exclaims, "I love him and I cannot seem to find him. When my lips go down to kiss the pool, his rise, he reaches towards me. Where do you go when I am reaching for you?" In the last lines, Narcissus comes to realize in horror that the truth at last, he is myself. I feel it, I know my image now. End quote. The idleness of the happy idiot dissolves into grief about the fact that he cannot attain or secure what he loves. He cannot kiss it, take hold of it, or possess it, and so he dies full of sorrow. Narcissistic self-love is no form of self-love after all, but instead a tragedy of self-absorption. It is like yearning for that chemical hit that serves only to reinforce and strengthen the endless craving for more, in which I fold back onto myself interminably, incurvatio in se. Self-love, if framed in this narcissistic manner, is simply vanity. Yeah. Lumen says, I made too many before I realized there's a limit you can have. He became a beautiful flower. Yeah. So, yeah, you do. And if you get a ton of followers or subs, you can increase the number of emotes you have. So, if you have a big streamer, they get 1 million emotes. But, yeah. But I have emote slots I don't use. I should, make use of them. I wouldn't mind having a my own ponder emote, because there's a lot of emotes. I use this one a lot. This, and then I got a frog ponder from a hype train somehow. So I've got these two. So the thinking emotes are good. There's also taking notes emotes, which are useful at times, like that. So yeah, like Volt says, and you can write stuff down. So these are typical sorts of emotes that one might have on Twitch. Yeah. Globus got the typing emote. Is that like a hacker man or something? Like drinking hemlock? That's pretty good there, Lumens. Yeah, hacker man noted. Yep. Joker says merely vanity. Narcissism is not vanity, but then the inability to really engage with the other. Yeah. Okay. Also a big fan of, the prof has some excellent emotes. Well, it's funny though. Yep. Okay. The present essay suggests such a critique of self-love as self-absorption or tragic bad faith about self-absorption achieves a half-truth. I concur that the narcissistic, solipsistic, kind self-love cultivates a denial of altruism, sacrifice for the other, and care for the common good in favor of self-interest and selfish analysis of opportunity cost. But I explore if there remains a dynamic type of self-love that does not envision the two objects of love, myself and the other, as rivals. I wish to propose 1. Self-love, and 2. Love for the other do not appear as a contradiction or as a binary choice, which would engender a zero-sum game where one cancels the other out. I propose, by assimilating the lesson of a powerful myth outlined above, to shift my self-love away from narcissism by reframing it as an integral interpersonal act that includes 1, myself, and 2, other, who are held together in my recurring back and forth movement of myself outward towards you and you towards me, that seeks to enhance the intrinsic nature of each of us without implying that in this movement, you and I fuse together or collapse into a single phenomenon. This form of self-love is what we call the material a priori self-love. Okay, material a priori of self-love, alrighty. A provisional framework concerning the structure of the self obviously obligates us to discuss my sense of self, however briefly, prior to the analysis of the back and forth movement of self-love and love of other. Okay. The problem of the self. Prior to the question of love of self, and indeed presumed in it lies the question of self as such. One may argue that the command to love myself reduces to a trick of sophism in that it gives the impression it has established precisely what needs to be proved and worked out in the first place, or at least broached the self's mode of being a self. A definition is required as a first step so that the self can be counted a self to be loved at all. The problem of self-love, therefore, is a twofold problem. The question of the self, and not in logical sequence, then the question of the internal dynamic of self-love elaborated in accord with the experiential boundaries of the definition of that self, And yet, as I shall suggest in the following sections, the definition of selfhood relies fundamentally on self-love. I do want to make one comment about the writing here. This is one sentence. This is another sentence. These are not short sentences. This person is a run-on sentence person. And this is why I'm stuttering sometimes, because these are like this. You can see this first sentence up here. This is a sentence too. Like this is a more normal sentence, but then these are like small paragraphs on themselves. And you can see see this here, the next sentence here. This is a sentence. So like you can have short sentences, but like a lot of these things are just like, there's a lot of words and a lot of stuff going on. So I apologize if I'm like stopping and going, but this is not the easiest read. Okay. The author says, I am insofar as I love myself. In order to be a self, I wish to advance the claim that an a priori of self-love operates within each of us, one which funds my very identity as this unique self, as this unique I interrelated to other unique I's. But first we ask, what kind of I is the self? Who am I? The Globus says, it's Bruce from Bruce Almighty answering my prayers. I use it as noted. Ah, okay. That's cool. Viper says, it'd be easier if you did a stereotypical, slightly offensive Irish accent. I don't even think I could pull off an Irish accent at the moment, so yeah. Thank you, Luminance. Yeah, Sockno says, yeah, that shit needs to be broken up. Yeah, I wonder if English is not this person's first language. It's not that it's poorly written. It's not. It's written, like, fine. It's a little... I mean, they're probably just a philosopher. This is how they write. It's just a little halting. Okay. The post-Cartesian epoch in philosophy has set itself the task of asking what I am, what kind of thing or entity am I? See, like this, like what kind of thing of entity am I with this am I at the end is a little unusual, I think, in like English. But like it's an okay sentence, but it's just a little strange. Not the locution I would use if I was like writing this sentence. Anyway, in the meditations we read, I know that I exist. The question is, what is this I that I know? In response, Descartes suggests I am indeed a thing or entity qualified as a thinking thing. But the latter formulation of an answer to this question, discoverable in the writings of Leibniz, invokes a reinforced or buttressed Cartesian ego, a fortified citadel of thinghood, an enclosed self, one I'd like to critique and surmount if self-love is possible apart from the loneliness of narcissism. The infamous analysis of monadology describes the ego in the language of both cognitive reflection and the closure of a self-subsisting thing. The ego adapts the position of oh my god, I cannot read that German, Selbstständigkeit, an ego thing that resides in the secure, windowless configuration of a monad. Sockno says, yeah, but I'm having issues with the fact that the publisher of a board of a journal allowed it through without them editing or tell the author it. Sockno, we've read so much worse than this. Like, this ain't that bad comparatively. I'm happy that this is even in the state it is. Like, this could be way worse. Like, this is fine as far as crap I've read. Philosophers do not, in general, write easy things to read. And it could be a lot easier. Like, a lot of it could be done better. It's just they don't spend the time on this. And it's too bad. Selbstständigkeit. Yes. Thank you. Dude, Tindarius, I think, a while ago, or maybe it wasn't Tindarius, they were going to have a redeem. Like, have Noah attempt to read something in German, and it's bad. Viper says English traditional, English simplified. That's all I'm saying. Yeah. I mean, what is that? There's like Wikipedia, like written at like a kid's level. Like, yeah. All right. Anyway, continuing. So I guess Leibniz writes, monads have no windows through which anything could enter them or depart from them. Accidents cannot become detached or wander about outside of substances as the sensible species of the scholastics once did. Thus, neither substance nor accident can enter a monad from outside, end quote. And monads have, quote, no parts, neither extinction nor shape nor divisibility is possible. And these monads are the true atoms of nature and, in a world, the elements of things, end quote. And as if such a tightly hemmed in makeup of the self as an opaque or windowless element and closed in on itself could be limited to the year 1714, Husserl, more than 2 centuries later, adopted that very language of monad to describe his version of the Cartesian ego in his Paris lectures of 1929, aptly entitled The Cartesian Meditations. Yeah. Lumen says, hi, I think Tinderis was there when I was talking about the concept of hearing in Heidegger because I was messing up the umlaut. I think I was talking about Heidegger's concept of hors. Ha, that's funny. Hors in hearing is just an umlaut off. That's good. Yeah. Well, as I always say, yes, I'm a meat popsicle, and I know English and bad English. That's all I know. Horin versus Horin. Nice. Okay. You're late? We're going, Verdurden. How you doing? I hope you're having a good day. We're reading a paper on narcissism, and is there any kind of self-love that is not just like narcissistic? Yeah, we'll find out. A purified Cartesian ego in Husserl's phenomenology intends to simply symbolize a transcendental ego that also bears only the faintest imprint of a window, for it resides firmly within itself. You had your first bonfire of the year. Congratulations. I'd like to have a bonfire. Husserl's phenomenology seemingly accomplishes an ego within the impermeable boundaries of a pure I myself, that is, my concrete being as a monad, purely in myself and for myself, with an exclusive ownness, or a, quote, primordial sphere of ownness, located in my primordial world, whatever the hell this is. Luminance says, nice, I grew up in San Diego, so you have bonfires all the time, but it's been years now, yeah. I mean, you could, maybe you could have had something like, well, like upstate New York, wherever you were. I mean, you could have like trees up there. Such a sphere, while mostly shuttered to the outside world, populated by others, involves a living ego, a set of intentional powers that does indeed relate to others by way of an analogy, mirroring and pairing, as he discussed in his now classic discussion of the experience of the alter ego in the 5th Cartesian meditation. This enables Husserl to move from the language of pure monad to intermonadology, which is a crucial advance beyond Descartes and Leibniz. But it does not appear to me that Husserl's ego rids itself of the difficulty of reducing the ego to the thinking thing shut up inside itself, not until his last great work of Crisis of European Sciences, where the concept of we synthesis opens of one monad to another. In point of fact, Husserl drops the vocabulary of monad altogether in the last work, for it cannot help but invoke the mood of closure and autonomy. Author prefers a brief re-engagement with the pre-Cartesian or medieval heritage of the Western self, one bequeathed to us in the work of Augustine. Perhaps the first systematic and critical elucidation of self and self-love as an I is locatable in the sprawling writings penned by the author of the Confessions in the late 4th century. Returning to an Augustinian framework may foster in us a desire to rethink the self as a complicated question that resists the closure of windowless or mostly windowless monadic sphere. While not treating his thesis here in any detail, it is fitting that Augustine also considered self-love to involve necessarily a rigorous interrogation of the questio of the self. A central narrative device played out in his spiritual inventory, detectable in the Confessions, is a persisting question, one he anticipates the reader to ask him with, quote, "Then I turned towards myself and said to myself, 'Who are you?'" A few pages later, "And this is in mind, this is I myself. What then am I, my God? What is my nature?" While Augustine is hailed as a forerunner of the inner I, or ego animus, he nonetheless made explicit the ego is at once intimate to itself and absent to itself. Lumen says, this is academic navel gazing on my part, but I hate the translation of Ursprünglich as primordial. I think originary is much better. Husserl threw monad from the train. Good for Husserl. Yeah. Yeah, he did, I guess, in the end. This is one of those things. We were reading something not long ago, maybe it was last week or something, but people were angry with Husserl because he was so Cartesian. And I mean, it was Heidegger was angry with him, and other people were angry with him because it's like he did hold on to some of these ideas from like a few hundred years earlier, and people were like, bad Husserl, you fucked it up. Oh no, did I miss you guys read Husserl on stream? I didn't read Husserl. We were discussing Husserl, and people like rightly were criticizing Husserl's Cartesianism as problematic. So yeah. Okay. Arthur continues. Hence, such queries did not serve to absolve Augustine of the problem of the self, a genuine puzzle that produced physical manifestations of stress. He correlated himself with existential sweat. He wrote, I find my own self hard to grasp. I have become for myself a soil which is a cause of difficulty and much sweat. It is I who will remember, I who am mind. It is hardly surprising if what I am not is distant from me, but what is nearer to me than myself. End quote. Fair says Luminance. I think he gets away from it in the crisis, though. Yeah, I mean that's what this author here is saying, that he started to like change at the end. Granted, by the time of the crisis of the European sciences, I think that's like 1936. Like Europe is on the brink of like war with the Nazi. Like things were breaking down. So like whatever you were thinking earlier in your life in 1936 in like Germany, like things are starting to get unhinged. Frank says this isn't a good argument. If not understanding yourself means you can't love yourself, then also means you can't love anyone else. Fair, Frank. This is a good point. This is still them setting up. This is one of these papers where it's a lot of setup. They haven't actually claimed a single thing yet. So you're saying it's not a good argument. You're right. There is no argument yet. This is all still preparation. So this is sort of like, this is a slow boil here, or like a slow build. And that's just the style. They made a lot of claims earlier on, and then this is about like what they are going to talk about. They set up the problem. They didn't make any claims. They just said, we're going to talk about narcissism and try to find some way that it's not so bad. But that they didn't make any claims then. And then now this is them like setting up what they want to talk about the self with. But again, they have not made any claims yet. It is very unsatisfying. And we've had papers that do this and never get anywhere. So like this, like if this paper fizzles out, this is a prime grapes rating. Like, cause it's like just talking and we haven't gotten anywhere, and we're getting towards the middle of the paper. And we are the frogs. Yeah, we are the frogs. Are narcissists pessimistic? I don't know, Hydrocannabinoid. I hope you're having a good day, though. Talking about why slow boil, just like give the argument that's why I was on a train in college. Not everyone was trained like you were. There are people coming at this from other traditions. You can see, like, I'm not reading, but like this person is quoting all the Latin, like that was given here. So like there's like big old blocks of Latin in this. I don't know if you're like reading along with me, but like there's like, he's like quoting the Latin here. So it's like this person is more historically oriented. So this may be a more history sort of based person. So I don't know, but it's like, yeah. So it's like he's quoting the original Latin from St. Augustine. So laboro hic et laboro in me ipso factus sum mihi terra difficultatis et sudordis nimi ego sum. Like, why would you put this in a philosophy paper? You don't need to, but like you could. Stockdale supports the Latin parts, but used properly. Fair, but I mention this because this is not needed in other philosophy, like other philosophers. Even if it's their translation, what they say is they give the quote and they say my translation. They don't like if there's something controversial about it, they would, indicate what was controversial and move on. This is different. This person's quoting everything, and so that makes me think that they're not. Their training is slightly different. That's all. Whiskey, hawk, ergo, hiccup. Yes, exactly. So, but like, this is one of these just like, just because they're writing it differently doesn't mean they don't know what they're doing. It's just, this may just be out of a different tradition. That's all. Like a more historical thing. Viper says his focus is theology, which probably explains the Latin. Yeah. So this may just be some more religiously tinged philosophy, and that's fine. Like, this is a topic that is both that is important both to like non-religious philosophy and theology. So, yeah. Yeah. Okay. The whole of book 10 in the Confessions originates in a theological question about the love of God and who is this God I have the privilege of loving. Quote, what is it that I love when I love my God? Quid ergo amo cum Deum amo. So it's like, again, more Latin right here. Love of self and love of God, as Anders Nygren illustrated decades ago in his classic study Eros and Agape, are interconnected and entangled in Augustine. What remains important for my purpose here is not theology, but the theme of self-love, a theme which prompts the difficulty of proposing a clear definition of the self at all, where nothing clear and distinct obtains for Augustine. I can only grasp myself as a weighty existential problem, even while I decide I can still say I. In the subsequent sections below, I turn this question of who I love when I love God back on ourselves and ask in a late modern idiom, who is it that I love when I love myself in the first person perspective? Is this self a self in isolation from other selves? If not, what is its structure, however difficult and laborious it is to define? If I am to surpass the rigid definition of myself as a mere object or entity, if I not to be reduced to the rank of a mere thing, I can ask an alternative question. Who am I? The conceptual play of grammar in Augustine's Latin above is noticeably ontological. A what can frame the question, what am I? Yet also in Augustine we glean the vocabulary of who, a quis, that designates the subjective life of the ego who can declare his identity in the statement, if only provisionally, ego ipsum sum, or I am myself. A dynamic field of subjective powers in relation to the subjective powers of others. I can and do say I or ego. However, in saying this, I am not fully graspable as a windowless monad or a thinking thing rooted in a narcissistic sphere of ownness. I am instead, to continue with the metaphor, namely an I who enjoys illumination and breathability from the outside, let in by doors and windows that make me fundamentally permeable to the world. Okay, so now we're looking at histories here. Okay. Yeah, so BA Northwestern, Gordon Cromwell Theological Seminary, St. Louis University, PhD of Edinburgh. Yeah. I am myself also Irene. What's up, Bowser? How you doing? All right, so Frank, to get to your point, we have just started to get to where they want to go. You can see they're starting to focus in on that it's a what and a who. So the who has powers related to other people. So if you're saying you're a who, like a what could just be like a solitary thing, but a who is like, you're selecting among a group. Like, who is this? Like, who, not just a what, because you could be a unique individual, but a who is like a who among people. And so this is where they're starting to make their first moves into how they want to talk about the self. And so you can already see in the understanding of the grammatical who as a relation between things, that's where they're going to start to, make some space. Yeah. Okay. Conversely, not all in contemporary philosophy who write on love would agree with my Augustinian model. Even those indebted to Augustine's anthropology, like Jean-Luc Marion, do not recuperate a dynamic subject who enjoys interchange with the world by means of open doors and windows. In reacting to Descartes, Leibniz, and Husserl, the theme of love in Marion signifies the complete withdrawal of a self. Like withdrawing troops from the field of battle over the ego, Marion, to be clear, moves so far in the opposite direction with his analysis of love that he not only thinks self-love is impossible, but that a self must be utterly decentered as to be incapable of saying I. The problem of the self in Marion is resolved by reduction of the self to a passive recipient, a dative me, who lies in wait to receive its identity from the other's gaze, who is prior to me as a self. I am nothing but open doors and windows in Marion's model. In his work Prolegomena to Charity, as well as in the erotic phenomenon, Marion carefully and consistently articulates itself according to the logic of pure passivity. Only a brief engagement with each work in succession suffices here to mark the point. First, in Intentionality of Love, an essay in the Prolegomena, Marion is unequivocal that the other precedes me, and in that order of priority, she gives me to myself. I do not intend the other, but the inverse occurs. I am intended by the other. This he calls counter-intentionality. He writes, I am not the first person to arrive, or something in French, I shouldn't even bother. Je n'ai pas le premier venu. In the same breath, he explains for exteriority to be emancipated from the interiority that defines the I, it is necessary that it disqualify the denominative power of the I. End quote. And further, Marion declares, quote, the other strips bare the I within me to the point of leaving only the me exposed. Then the I discloses itself before another's gaze and discovers that only a me remains. The me designates the I uncovered, stripped bare, decentered. I become me by uncovering myself as the simple me of another. End quote. Here, by Marion's lights, I achieve myself only on the strength of the generous gift of the other, who gives me to myself, since that other precedes me. I arrive after the fact. Who is this I? It is, as Marion proceeds in his analysis, in point of fact, a me. After the other bears witness to me and thus sees me, I am constituted as a me by the other's look. To say I is to fall prey to an illusion, just like to say I love myself is to lie to myself that I have a self to love at all. Yeah, and this is why people hate philosophy. Because I and me, this whole discussion of I's and me's, I get it. It's like, okay, if we are really fundamentally social things, then like the self-reflective I has no content to it. You have to be like in a social relation with somebody else to have an existence. That's fine. Okay. Y'all are giving... I should have gone to Wesleyan. I almost did. Okay, in the erotic phenomenon, similarly, Marion elucidates in section 9 the priority of the other, the one who arrives before me. This priority constitutes the grounds for the impossibility of self-love. I do not enjoy the presence of an I to love in myself, since I am originally given to myself by the other. Hence, the now such a temporal anteriority of the other flows from the very structure of this question, which signifies, does anyone out there love me? And implies aiming at an endpoint that is radically exterior to that which an actual love awaits, that is to say, another. End quote. In other words, for Marion, there is no self in place for me to love within myself, no I, but only a me that pauses until it is given to me by the gaze or aim of the other. The other arrives before me, which belongs to the rank of primacy inherent in the structure of counter-intentionality. Luminance says, not really the article's fault, but he's kind of glossing over the fact that Marion's argument is kind of about Husserl specifically. It reverses the way intentionality and meaning fulfillment work in phenomenology. That's good background. So it's like maybe this is a little bit like what they're saying Marion is claiming is really a very small point for Marion because it's just about Husserl. Okay, but we have to see what the author is going to make of this, you know? It's, again, this is a lot of setup. They already said there has to be an interplay, and you can already see what they're going to do is because if they're spending all of this time on this, they're going to say, well, what actually is this counterintentionality? And the author here already said they're going dynamic. So it's not going to be that the structure is going from outward to me, from somebody else to give me my identity. It's going to be back and forth. So we started off with the me alone, then this one is the opposite, which is the given it from the other alone, and then they're gonna have to like split the difference somehow, or that's what I expect at least. Lumen says that I feel it comes off kind of trivial if you're not already invested in Husserl's whole intentionality structure thing. Yeah, easily could be. Okay, self-love therefore remains impossibility for those philosophers like Marion who deny the self genuinely obtains as an I. The self must sacrifice itself before the altar of the other, or so that or so that is the logic of pure passivity as I understand it. My reading of Marion begs the question not does anyone out there love me, end quote, but instead the more urgent question of what does it mean to say me at all, end quote. Marion's model of a dative self involves no self after all, a fundamental incompatibility that amounts to a patent contradiction in terms. The logical inconsistency of Marion's model of counterintentionality is that he does not consider how he himself must also be capable of giving the other to herself. What kind of subjective agency and powers of endowment must the act of counterintentionality involve, whereby I give the self to the other and vice versa? If the I is an illusion as it is Marion, how do I give the other her sense of self? Yeah. I mean, this is fair. Like, if you can't you have no I, what power do we have socially as another person that all of a sudden confers the I onto the other so that then they are a me? I mean, where would that come from? I mean, it would be some sort of social structure, I guess, because I don't know. Okay. And maybe Luminous is right. This may have too many reliance on Husserlian technicalities. I have no idea. Okay. How does the other, if she is also stripped bare like me, able to give me to myself? I'm inclined to judge Marion's passive self, the dative me, as tragic as monadic self-possession. The tragedy is not that of bad faith, which can be solved by being honest with oneself, but instead of the fact that pure passivity leads to the erasure of each of us. Neither the lover nor the beloved exhibit selves to exchange, and so love is impossible as it is conceived under the aspect of Marion's refusal of the self, of the I. I could unmask Marion's deficit in candid plain language. One passive me stripped bare and decentered lays in equipoise before another me also stripped bare and decentered in perfect inaction and quietism. No one makes the first move because no ego or I is there to marshal the power to set into operation counterintentionality. Because the act of my giving yourself to you and my receiving myself from you necessitates that I am an I that enjoys the power to give identity to the other, the requisite of giving and receiving love is not met. Marion's project fails to make love possible at all, eliminating not only self-love, but love as such. How shall we proceed from here? Self-love, I wish to argue, in what follows, solves Marion's logical inconsistency because it includes a self that loves itself without implying either that it prioritizes the other or excludes the other. Lumen says this is where Marion probably plays the endless Kantian trick, logically prior, not temporally prior, haha. These philosophers know what they're doing. Like, there's always another trip. Frank has never felt more sympathetic to Ivan's opinion on continentals. Yeah. Miro, we are just still like spinning wheels on what it is to be a self at this point. So, yeah, I mean, this is we are now on page 6 of 12, and so we are dead smack in the middle. Hopefully we'll get somewhere, because nothing's been said yet. The material a priori, I am because I love myself and you. I am not a windowless monad. Just keep saying that, yes. I am not a windowless monad. I am not a windowless monad. I resemble, if I resemble any structure at all, an open field of subjective experience that involves at every turn existential sweat that pours out onto the other. Okay. Recall Augustine's conception that I am for myself a soil which is a cause of difficulty and much sweat. In this arable soil, I love myself and the other in one single dynamic movement, just as you love yourself and me simultaneously. This makes possible a pre-given structural a priori that is open to the other from the outset in advance. I love myself not because I arrive first, but because you and I arrive at the same time. We are neither early nor late, but just on time together. See, they're wizards. We arrive together. Self-love then remains a co-movement and a priori intersubjectivity. This is what I call the a priori of self-love, which challenges the closure of narcissism. How might we reconfigure the a priori to make sense of love in this open texture fashion? Okay. Yeah, Jean-Luc Marion, phenomenology guy. For some reason, just writes about Descartes now. Yeah, well. Yeah, so now we've finally gotten to what they say. The only love here is with somebody else, and in loving somebody else, that means you get to love yourself too. That's it. This is the big reveal. Oh my God. So that's it. Because when we get to say we love each other, I love you, chat, and you love me, of course, then you can say you like yourself in virtue of us being in love with each other. Then you can love both yourself and the other. I love you, man. Thank you, Combo Meal. Okay. I love me too. Exactly, Vipers. I love me too. Okay, strictly defined, the a priori that is self-love cannot be configured in the terminology of the transcendental structure of the a priori that Kant specified. The critique of pure reason clearly outlines that the a priori is situated in the ego wholly independent of empirical content of any concrete experiential matter whatsoever. The a priori manifold, mainly here space and time among other categories, constitutes a set of pre-given categories arranged in the mind that remain the necessary and universal condition for experience to occur and thus obtain at all. Yeah, exactly, Combo. You just love you so much and then me so much, exactly. Dojo doesn't love Dojo. I think very highly of Dojo. Yeah, well, fair enough. We think very highly of you too, Dojo. Okay. So this is the a priori. Hence, they are necessary, the categories, because they enjoy the status of the conditions on which the possibility of experience depends, and that found it even if one abstracts from everything empirical in the appearances. This Kantian conception of the a priori can be characterized as an empty form designated like a placeholder, which represents the possibility of the cognition of objects in general. In fact, the Kantian a priori must in principle denote a pure conceptual formality because, as Kant states, it cannot be, quote, borrowed from experience, but must always contain the pure a priori conditions of a possible experience and an object of it, end quote. The a priori structure of cognition is pure because it can contain nothing empirical, which signifies for Kant nothing experiential. Such a Kantian conception of the a priori, influential though it be, remains abstract, formal, and ultimately void of material experience. Noted Kantian of the 20th century, C.I. Lewis, adopts a similar position, but with sharper clarity. The a priori is herein formulated as empty formal. The cognitive structure of the faculty of understanding presupposes for Lewis two elements: the concept and the sensuously given. Thank you for the alert, misadventures. The concept, quote, gives rise to the a priori and all a priori truth is definitive or explicative of concepts. Empirical truth or knowledge of the objective arises through conceptual interpretation of the given, end quote. The given resembles ineffable chaos, whatever that is, and the mind confronts the chaotic given with its a priori repertoire of concepts, which in turn supply a level of control and boundaries to the chaos of experiential matter. And the a priori must be determined in advance of the particular experience to which they apply in order that what is given may have meaning. Until the criteria of our interpretation have been fixed, no experience could be the sign of anything or even answer any question. Concepts thus represent what mind brings to experience, end quote. And these truths, finally, again in Kant, are definitive. Such a rigid set of categories or concepts, the cognitive architecture of the a priori, imposes itself on the chaotic given of the material world in order to bring forth genuine alignment between subject and object. So many good band names in this paper: Ineffable Chaos, Sensuously Given. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of fun. Like, this is not in like the analytic philosophy mold. This is more historical continental stuff. I mean, we're talking a lot about Kant now, so you're getting a lot of these sort of phrases that are like big phrases. That's kind of what it is. And you're supposed to like understand, like, there's a lot wrapped up in these big phrases. I Miro, I cannot pull up the John McDowell this fast. So I would be unsurprised if it was not directly referencing the Kant, because I mean that is the canonical thing that people are saying, okay, what's given versus like the structure of what's given. I mean, that's the big thing in Kant, is like, you know, you have to understand what is the conditions for understanding the world. Lumen says Kantian philosophy is, as I like to say, Kantian, yeah. Frank says, I feel like they ended up saying that the self brings itself into being simultaneously with the other, but I don't think it said anything about self-love, really. No, but what it did say is that it gave what it said very briefly above is it's giving a structure that love of self comes with loving one another. So you've got a mutual love thing that somehow shows up. And now what they're arguing is that this necessarily exists as one of the categories of being for like the possibility of human experience. They're trying to justify a unique structure of self-love in the categories of like existence for us. So they're trying to give it a metaphysical backing here. So then they're calling it unique and fundamental, and that's their strategy to say, well, there's self-love if it happens to be a unique mutuality thing between people. You know, I'm getting really strong, like, yeah, this, like, was said in chat, this guy's in theology. The theory is coming out of St. Augustine, which is a religious tradition. So it's between, like, instead of love between you and God, you're having love between you and another person. And so you're getting God out of the picture, but you're taking the same sort of religious understanding of a special relationship that you have with another from the religious tradition and making it secular, and then they have to do all this work to like declare it fundamental, because clearly your religious relationship to God would be fundamental, but when you don't have God in the picture, then you have to do all this bullshit metaphysics to make it sound like it's fundamental. I mean, that's what sounds like is going on to me. This would be a hard listen even for the best voice actor writing stuff, man. Yes, it is. Thank you for noticing. I said it earlier. This is not easy to read. But yeah, like it'd be one thing if I had read it before and I prepared. This is, you know, real time. Lumen says, from what I can tell of the paper's argument, Kant equals I apply my concepts to a given sense data, and that constitutes them as entities. 2, Marion, they come first, that constitutes them in relation to them. 3, this paper, we constitute each other at the same time. Neither is prior. Yes. So yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty similar. Frank says that's all fine, but that's entities, not the love. The love is a category that we can exist in, Frank. Yeah, because otherwise it would be able to like degrade into something else. But if it's a fundamental category, and this is my guess, they didn't say this yet, but if it's like somehow like unique and fundamental, then it can't be broken, damaged, ruined, or whatever. Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. In light of the author's rejection of this Kantian heritage rehearsed above, what kind of a priori is self-love then? If it is not a set of purely cognitive criteria determined in advance of material experience, how may be it named a priori? Not all a priori principles mean the same thing, as even Husserl, a champion of the Kantian a priori, admits. Husserl acknowledged that the a priori suffered from a notorious infection of ambiguity and obscurity. The effect of such critique of Kant's abstract language is a shift away from the abstract language towards an existential language first formulated by Husserl's student, Heidegger. I mean, that's a little unfair to, might be a little unfair to, Kierkegaard. But anyway. Expressing a move towards the existential domain, then the a priori of self-love turns the Kantian style of a priori on its head. The pre-given experience of self-love invokes something like an... Yeah, see this? Right here. Pre-given experience of self-love. Pre-given experience. What kind of fucking thing is pre-given experience? Yeah, not clear how love comes in here. Yeah, this is like right here. Like, this is the fucking move. What the fuck is that? And they just said like, oh, we're not doing anything like anyone else. But what the fuck is a pre-given experience? The pre-given experience of self-love invokes something like an intimate or concrete material a priori. Heidegger, in Being in Time, explicitly abandons the formality and abstract orientation of the a priori of Kantian heritage in favor of concrete personal orientation, which notifies us of the fact that we exercise ongoing care about our own being as a possibility to be cultivated. Yet what makes this an a priori? Yeah, because we're thrown into the world, motherfucker. That doesn't define our relationships. It just says we're in the world. That's fine. That's all that happened in fucking Heidegger. We got the thrownness. That's our pre-given experience, is thrownness, not the fucking love. Sorry. Excuse me. Miro says, I haven't read Husserl, but here is pretty tough to crack. Be more sympathetic to Heidegger if what I heard about he analyzes being is correct. It's a big topic, Miro. Big topic. Lumen says either they're misusing the word experience or they have a really weird definition of experience. Yeah, I'm going with the latter. Really weird definition going on here. Okay. For Heidegger and for the present essay, the existential a priori does not depend on any particular circumstance, attitude, or character trait attached to the self that loves itself. The existential a priori is universal and already there is in advance posited in each of us. See, yeah, this is what I said. It's a category. They're defining a new category for us. That's all they're doing. The a priori, recast in an existential mold, designates that my care for myself is intrinsic to my structures. This is what I meant, fundamental. They're defining it as intrinsic to my structure, as one whose very being is an issue for myself. So they're defining this self-love or this love intrinsically to us. It's a category for our existence. I exercise care and concern for unfolding of my being no matter what. Heidegger writes in this vein exactly, quote, care as primordial structural totality lies before every factical attitude and situation of Dasein, and it does so existentially a priori. This means that it always lies therein. This is the fucking thrownness. Like, what do you mean by care here? What is meant by care? Okay. Tell us how you really feel? Okay, Ryder. You see, Luminance has a fucking PhD in Heidegger. And so, when he is saying that this author is misusing terms, he actually knows what he's talking about. I could easily be wrong. But when Luminance says that, the terms are misused, then the terms are misused. Frank says, I feel like it's their definition of love that I don't understand. I'm only following tiny pieces, so I don't really trust yourself. That's fair. They have defined a category of existence that love inhabits. They have not actually told us what love is. The whole thing that they're doing here is that the category of existence, the structure of existence that includes love, also includes self-love for them here. And that's all they're trying to do. So they're not going to give us a full-fledged theory of love. They're just giving us a theory of the structure of love that includes self-love. Miro says, I'm pretty sure in terms of phenomenology of intersubjective care is something Hannah Arendt talked about, but I haven't read her. I would like to eventually get around to her. Eichmann in Jerusalem eventually, though. Yeah, I mean, she's one of Heidegger's students, so she's going to know about this. Okay, technical vocabulary aside for the moment, Heidegger reconfigures the a priori as a fundamental posture I have with regard to myself, my own primordial structural totality within me that is directed towards me. This a priori orientation I affect towards myself always lies within me prior to any attitude or situation that is factical or on the ground and particularized by me. Before I adopt any specific attitude about my individual situation in life, before I'm aware of my gender, ethnicity, height, socioeconomic status, IQ, etc., I assume a posture of care and concern towards myself. I mean, yeah, but there's not a whole lot to read into that. Frank says, I think an explanation I could try to make for the paper would be me creating a new theory of my own, not explaining theirs. That's fair. I mean, that's fair. Douglas says, my work to talk about love at the wedding, I really enjoyed the talk about Alvin Noe, love and consciousness that he had online was given at the Stanford Humanities Center. He provides distinctions between love and as judgments, I love pizza, and love as an activity whereby we improve each other, inform each other, interact with each other sensitively and genuinely. This paper never defines love so far. No, it's, like I said, trying to describe it earlier, it's defining a structure that love should have. That's all. That's all it's doing. Ross says, I'm aware I may or may not be mid-watching Luminance's series on Heidegger's Origin of Art. There you go. Mira says, it seems like when Jean-Luc Marion is applying modern Heidegger concepts, he's smuggling in Christian theological assumptions instead of bracketing metaphysics in the way Heidegger did. I'm not knowledgeable enough to say that, but then again, you have to remember Heidegger was the kid of a right-wing religious nutcase pastor. So I wouldn't give Heidegger a pass on not smuggling in like crazy religious doctrine either. Dogno says, yeah, I'm kind of internally exploded, so I'm just trying to keep cool. This guy's obtuse for no reason. Yep. This Heideggerian phrase of primordial structural totality, I think, refers to a parallel attitude of self-love, namely that an existential structural totality is pre-given and that I love myself as this self intrinsically, quite independently of my status, personality, gender, and quite apart from any episode in life that bears on a specific relationship. Yeah, they're just defining it, that we have this thing. This is not saying anything, because it's just, you can see, they said in parallel. Like, they're not saying even Heidegger does it, a parallel attitude. That's all. They're just defining, oh, this is like the other stuff, but we're just gonna give it there. Yeah. Okay, I cannot trace back self-love to any specific act or drive, to any mental state like willing, wishing, urging, or to an addiction like craving, nor is it a construction composed out of these states of mind. Hence, the a priori of self-love is a primordial structural totality in which I live toward myself. I therefore do not love myself in a contingent manner, in the sense that sometimes I love myself in the world as I remain open to it, and sometimes I do not. It is not as if I am simply a self, and then, by way of an extra add-on, I occasionally love myself in relation with particular traits of myself. The a priori of self-love intends to claim that I am never free from self-love. Being in love with myself is intrinsic to the definition of myself as the self. Again, I do not love myself only when the inclination strikes me. Yeah, so this is just defining self-love as part of your being. That's all it says. You always love yourself because that is the kind of thing you are. Yeah, Frank says, I kind of feel like there's a point though, like love is the recognition as subject instead of object. So with myself and other, we each create the love to others simultaneously, and in that way, a person recognizes themselves as a subject is self-loving, but I'm building that they aren't. Yeah, what they are building now is they're saying self-love is intrinsic to our being. This is just our existential lot in the world, and it is the way we orient ourselves to the world involves our self-love. So they are just defining this in some fundamental way as something special about how we exist in our world. That's it. And then, they're going to do the further thing to do it with someone else. But they are literally just defining it as part of our being. So that's how they're getting away with saying it's not narcissism. We can't escape it because it is literally part of our existence. And you can't hate the fact that you exist. I mean, you can hate the fact that you exist, but that's not inherent. That you exist is just, that is how you exist. That's all. Yeah. Okay, so he is doing some negative theology. Okay, interesting. Papa John's, that might be good pizza. I don't know. I don't think I've ever had it. Okay, recall as a self, I am a complicated or difficult question. I am not certain who I am, to enlist Augustine's tendency to make the I correspond to existential sweat. Yet the unknowing of or uncertainty about my identity need not result in the abandonment of self altogether, as in Marion above. I continue to say I, even as I acknowledge that I am open to possibilities to be. Thus, self-love is an existential a priori, one anticipated with precision in Heidegger that I adopt. You did not adopt it. You made this shit up, and then you're saying I adopt it. That's just this is begging the question what it is. That you postulate is what you are doing. The a priori, as I understand it, coincides with the very concrete experience. Yeah, to give Heidegger some credit, Heidegger has arguments. And to this person is just saying, that thing Heidegger does, I'm adding to it. There's love also. okay, but like that's a postulate. It just is. I do not order from chains. I'm in New York. We do not do that. Or we do that, but we don't consider it pizza. We consider it fast food. Miro. Yeah. Okay. The a priori, as I understand it, coincides with the very concrete experience I have of myself as the self who occupies this or that space at any given moment in an ongoing primordial structural totality, inasmuch as I always matter to myself in my state of becoming. Self-love, then, is a structure of being, not a condition of possibility. The a priori of self-love, if it truly counts as material and personal, not abstract and formal, must contain empirical content because it is continuously preoccupied with the self that it is here and now and how it is possible to be in the future. Self-love, as I propose it, is therefore decidedly not formal or empty or neutral. I cannot operate as an impartial spectator who reasons about the nature of myself and the world in the third person stance. I love myself instead as my own beloved, just as I experience myself as this self who always matters within the first person point of view. Yeah, see, they're just defining it as part of your being, and so you always have to have some self-love there. Always. Yet, the author continues, and I will address this in the subsequent section below, self-love can be damaged, vitiated, drained. Possibilities can be robbed. The certainty of the a priori conceived in this manner does not produce indubitable or unshakable abstract principles like 2 + 2 is 4. If I don't enforce boundaries, then it follows that my I can be subject to abuse, betrayal, manipulation, especially by a narcissistic other. The antipode of self-love is the narcissistic impulse to use the other for self-gratification, to absorb the other for my benefit. In light of this threat, self-love belongs also to the larger process whereby I love the other. As a consequence, self-love already involves the love of us. The love of us suggests that I am called to be receptive to the other's flourishing, just as they are, in their unique dignity, without controlling them or seeing them as a reflection of myself, as in the myth of Narcissus. To that complicated interchange between myself and the other, we now turn. I mean, it just sounds like they're, defining themselves into a position of everything they want. They have defined themselves into a position where we are structurally always loving ourselves and now always loving the other. But like, yeah, now we have to be careful. But like, this is just getting metaphysically messy. I do not have any specific theory of selfhood. No, I haven't thought very much about it. Dojo, why do I hate this so much? I want to punch this guy in the throat. Yeah. Like, so how much more do we got? We got to get so we got to get, basically two full pages. You know, like I said, this is definitely in the religious tradition. This is not in, it's a little like is in the continentally religious tradition. So they're not so much arguing as defining what they want the situation to be. And like I said, it feels really like this is coming from the Augustine. You have a special relationship to God in Christianity, and now you don't want to do it with God because they're trying to do philosophy here. You're trying to have a special relationship with yourself and the other, whatever that might be. And it doesn't seem to make sense if to call it like special and unique and like precious and like without having a religious deity on the other side of it. So they are working really fucking hard to make it metaphysically special, but they are not doing any of the metaphysical arguments. They just found Heidegger and they're just like trying to latch on to that like metaphysical shooting star and say this is what it is. Luminance says we have to make a decision on being. We need a prior love of ourselves. Yeah, huge leap. But see, that's weird, isn't it? Like, what do you mean we have to make a decision on our being and then we have to love ourselves? Like, it's so crazy because they just want to define it and they're defining it as we have that. Frank says, I think they have had 1,000 conversations about love with their religious brethren and take so many things for granted they don't know how to explain them to us. Well, I think they're doing I think I'm right on this one, that they're just defining shit. They're not even explaining it. Like, maybe you're right and they think they're explaining stuff. I think they're just defining stuff, and maybe they've got a confusion on like what they're even doing here. Miro's sympathetic to hermeneutic theories of self described by Gadamer, Taylor, Ricoeur, and others where the self is constituted by a series of interpretive relations. Sure. Doger says he seems to be suggesting that we have been bestowed consciousness and the appreciation for our own existence requires that we love ourselves. We must have gratitude for our own existence. Fuck you, dude. Throat punch. I don't even think they're making that claim. It's that not that we must, it's that this is how we exist. And they've just defined it that like we have to exist in this way. And so it's not even that we must have gratitude, it's that you must because there's no other way that you could exist. So it's not that you decide, it's that you have to realize that you are this way and that is what we are. And that's why this is just so metaphysically suspect to me. And like that's why they put so much time in calling it a priori. It's a metaphysical a priori, not a religious one, but like they're saying, look, this is just how we exist in the world is with self-love. Like, come on, really. Frank says self-love making myself exist. Yeah, I mean, me making myself exist, just what it is. Doja says, so his definition of love is just a goalpost that he moves to cover his own definitions. That's what I think is going on. That's exactly what it is. Viper says, total aside, but I just discovered a little Google Maps Easter egg. When you look at Loch Ness in Scotland, the little Street View guy turns into a Loch Ness monster. That's so sweet. Good for Google on that one. Probably done before they decide to turn evil. You know, we should define Loch Ness as like Loch of America. That's what we should do. Okay. Commitment to you and me, the entanglement of self-love and other love. Author says, I am not making a plea that self-love is the type of a priori that corresponds to absolute certainty, as if my personal identity were impenetrable to doubt. It is not a pure form that is formally true in every case. Self-love consists instead of a commitment to myself that is regularly negotiated and reinforced. But I can break a commitment. Self-love does not fulfill all of its duties in furnishing me with certainty about me that I am absolutely unshakably in love with myself without any work or effort. Recall, I am Augustinian sweat to myself. The labor to achieve self-love as a lived experience is lived in light of the other, for the a priori of self-love is neither monadic nor empty formal. Yeah, it's a structure that we exist in, and then realizing it takes work. Everyone's getting burned tonight? Yes. Doja says, Loch of America seriously is a bad naming evening. Yes, that's true. It's define everything how we just think it shouldn't be. Okay. The preferable language to employ here is that this primordial structure in which I love myself is an ongoing act of commitment to myself. By any measure, commitment takes work. I am committed to show up to my job every day on time. I am committed to my spouse as a faithful and attentive partner. I am committed to my kids to be a parent who provides for them and thus does not abandon them. All of these commitments and more are proven over and over again and can fail in the face of resistance or struggle or circumstance. There exists now or in the offing no guarantee except to say that the act of commitment is held up and reinforced over and over again. Frank says, I don't like the paper, but I can't hate it and hate it all the way because in disliking, I've found interesting things of my own to think about. That is very, very charitable of you, Frank. It's like, even though it's very stupid, it brought up some good, like some interesting ideas along the way. That's charitable. Okay, like I'm not happy with this paper. I mean, I don't think this is a dumb person. This is an interesting person. I agree with you, Frank, on that. Like, they kind of have an idea what they're doing. I just think it's a terrible philosophy. Like, this is just bad philosophy. Like, I'm going to define this thing I want as, like, fundamental so I can have it. Like, it's like, how's the world? No, tell me how the world is. You don't get to define the world as you want it. Like, that's okay. But, like, seriously. All right. Self-love as a commitment to myself is a promise to value myself without qualification, which constitutes a risk in that I am vulnerable to being violated by the other. Boundaries arise at this junction between myself and the other. Boundaries endure only so long as they are enforced, and boundaries function to preserve self-love. In my act to protect the love of myself, I also love you. I am fundamentally interpersonal in that I am fractured to and open to others' subjective eyes. Insofar as I am not purely isolated, I love you and me together as us. What happens, however, if you abuse and manipulate me, or if I abuse and manipulate you? Sorry, I'm like, why you get to have this sort of relationship with others? They're just defining this again. I bet it just sounds so different to another person in their Bible study. Yeah, I'm sure if you're an Augustinian, this sounds very different. I completely agree. Okay, author says, I cannot love myself by permitting others to injure or harm me. Intimacy continues to be vulnerable to abuse if I let my guard down. See, this is why I keep thinking they're just and I'm not a religious scholar, I don't know, but I just keep feeling like this is your personal relationship to God. You never have to worry about God abusing you because God, is omnibenevolent in the Western tradition, at least. And so it's they're just trying to put this in some other way, but that, and that's where all these, you're going through the list of problems you don't have when you're dealing with God versus another person. All right. So intimacy continues to be vulnerable to abuse if I let my guard down when it comes to enforcing boundaries in the face of the advance of the other. Anthony Steinbach calls the capacity to decide to protect myself and thus strengthen my self-love an activity of discernment. The result of boundaries, to be sure, is that I do not only protect my own self-love of myself, but also my love of you, precisely in that I do not permit you to violate your humanity and dignity by treating me abusively. In retreating from an abusive relationship that has denied me as intrinsically valuable and worthy, I am loving myself and you. Since the I is interpersonal, and thus, why did the I get interpersonal? This is the first time they said the I was interpersonal. The I is me, but then also you. I love you also. But how did the I get interpersonal all of a sudden? Excuse me. I'm sorry I'm yelling. And since the I is interpersonal and thus heirable to you as other, and none assumes priority of the other, the act of retreating from you does not imply abandonment. It is instead an act of loving you in that I protect you too. So, to manage the situation by removing myself from a relationship with you is to protect us both from a situation subject to physical or emotional abuse. The concern for myself, self-love, is also and simultaneously a concern for us. See, if they said the us over there, that, I wouldn't have yelled. But I'm just they're just redefining stuff quickly. And thus an act of loving us together. How to be godly towards others. Yeah, kind of. Were you raised in religious culture, and if so, what? Not really. I mean, I'm pretty not. My dad was religious. My dad's side's more religious. My mom's side was not. I don't believe shit. Douglas says, love this. We feel this guy's a solipsist. He's trying to convince his figments that he has grace. Yeah, kinda. I guess because I and me are co-constituting. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what it looked like when you got down here. Yeah, so you got ahead of me on that one, Luminance. Douglas says, the I is interpersonal because he's a solipsist that he's talking to his figments. Yeah. Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, or Jewish. Yeah. Whatever the Reform Jew stuff was that doesn't even count as religious. That's where I got brought up. And yeah, do I believe? No. Only the happy idiot enjoys a level of self-love purified from such dangers of abuse, or so is the lie to which the happy idiot succumbs. The happy idiot, free from conflict, is also free from the possibility of abuse and manipulation, and ultimately is invulnerable to doubt or insecurity. The shocking reality unveiled by the happy idiot will always remain the lack of self-awareness such behavior requires, and precisely in this way, the happy idiot relies on self-absorption. In other words, it is a chief symbol of narcissism. Unaware of others and thus the prospect that the happy idiot indeed does hurt and abuse others, the lie remains intact because he dwells happily in his or her own self-absorbed monadic world. Philosophically, the happy idiot may well be adopted unintentionally by some philosophers who seek to defend self-love on these terms. Frank says, I think the happy idiot is a stoic. I'm wondering if they're thinking about Donald Trump actually at this point, because it's you've got a guy who just he just does what he wants. He thinks it's great, and it's he doesn't realize that there's damage going on. So that's the cutoff from the rest of the world, is you don't actually realize the damage you're doing. You're just very convinced that you're doing the best stuff because you're only dealing with your own interests. I really don't want to get into religious arguments because I don't know shit about arguments. Yeah. So, thus the inverse may well be possible even if we do not have space to pursue it fully. How might we outline a train of thought that moves in the opposite direction of the happy idiot, namely that I love myself in the other? In loving the other's self-love, we may well combat or therapeutically treat narcissism. In loving the other self-love, therefore, we do not treat the other person as if she were identical with ourselves. The quantitative extinction of self-love cannot literally project onto the other the identical formation of self-love I have to myself, which constitute an act of projection devoted merely to my own self-maintenance or self-satisfaction. In placing of love... The quantitative extinction of self-love cannot literally project onto the other the identical formation of self-love I have to myself, which constitutes an act of projection devoted merely to my own self-maintenance or self-satisfaction. Why would they claim that your self-love is self-maintenance now or self-satisfaction when they said it's a fundamental orientation? Then you have to self-love yourself in a realization of that. But why would that be self-maintenance? Now, they say, yeah, you have to work on this. Now, and I grant that like your form of care and other person's form of care will not be the same. Like I care for the world in a different way than like other people care about stuff. That's fine. It's just their like reformulation here is a little strange here. There we go. Rodern's like, yeah, happy idiot. Yeah. Yeah, Amira, if you want to go bug, yeah, Ivan argues about religion and in design. That's Ivan. Yep. Lumen says Alvin Patinkin's most heavy iron. Don't wait until AC unit breaks. Yeah, okay. Okay. In place of loving the other in myself, perhaps I could love myself in the other's self-love. Hence, I would join in with your self-love occurring in an a priori domain, which is already entangled with my self-love. See, and this is my problem. Right here, how fast they called it a priori, but then right here, there's maintenance going on. The maintenance doesn't feel very a priori. Because the a priori is a structure, the maintenance is what you actually do. Yeah. Okay. Author continues, my model of self-love then unfolds in the following manner. I extend my self-love to the other's self-love in exchange that negotiates in and through the difference not as a source of conflict and alienation, but as a source of celebration of the other just as she is given. Love does not seek Love does not seek out opportunities to change or educate the other, which can convert into abuse and control. Love instead accepts wholly the other person as she is given. I myself can learn the narrative of patience in which I love myself and the other as both as unique eyes who are intrinsically valuable and to whom I am fully and wholeheartedly committed. Such a wholehearted approach to self-love, I pause to note, would ramify self-love into further exciting avenues of future research, which for the sake of space can only be hinted at here. Okay, you just got to get down to the bottom of this page. Conclusion. Self-love is wholeheartedness. By way of conclusion, permit me to accentuate the subjective manner in which I am acquainted with myself in the ongoing act of self-love, namely wholehearted commitment. I have suggested that when I love myself genuinely, I am committed both to myself and to you as an us, without reservation or hesitation, except when dynamic interpersonal exchange becomes threatened by abuse, injury, manipulation, and ultimately narcissism. In point of fact, to resist narcissism, its consumptive and greedy attitude toward the other is to demonstrate my commitment to self-love as an interpersonal phenomenon. To be half-hearted would be to descend into the domain of the happy idiot who lies to himself about the certainty and security of love, where bad faith neglects to attend to the contingencies of pain, abuse, and injury. Doga says, figuring out what the hell I'm trying to say, left as an exercise for the reader. I mean, that's actually an old joke in philosophy, where you say the stuff you don't want to do, I leave that to the reader to figure out, it's trivial. The interrelation between myself and you, between each of us, necessarily forces upon us the problem of the self, in which I stress the only way to challenge the narcissism of the monadic ego. Even if we lack the conceptual skills to articulate it, I suggest a recuperation of the proto-existential self of Augustine. Here, resources point to an interpersonal self in which I find myself to appear like a soil that remains difficult, insofar as I struggle to the point of sweat in the pursuit to define myself in clear and distinct ideas. From the point of departure of philosophical anthropology, the existential a priori of self-love complemented the dynamic self who never may close in on itself. As a material and personal a priori, the experience of self-love necessarily involves the other. The entanglement of the first-person perspective and second-person perspective opens up the entanglement of us, in which I do not love you inside of me, narcissism once more, but as I venture forth outward, fully committed to myself, to enter into your domain by joining in with your self-love, encouraging the mutually indwelling of the love of us. Risk, vulnerability, and contingency may well undercut the a priori of self-love. Boundaries and their enforcement represent a commitment of self-love and love of other. A wholehearted gesture toward and discussion of boundaries enjoys welcome as a therapy or medicine readied to treat the ailment of narcissism. And that is it. Happily. But now we get to rate it. What do you think about this paper? Did you love this paper? With your wholehearted heart, how do you feel about this? If it made your brain dance, you give it a brain dance. If you thought this was talking about existential, kind of socially or artistic drama, you give it a nog scream. If you think it had deeper ancient ideas, you give it an Ouroboros, nog Oro. If you thought it had it's slicing and dicing, cut up arguments, give it a nog knife. Nog navel for navel gazing, only for academics. Nog turd, all style, no substance, still poop underneath. And nog grapes for big claims that shriveled up. They never got anywhere. Also, you can give it a globally vote yay or vote nay from Twitch. Those are global emotes, and my vote meh. Note, I make an overall score with this, so anything in the green makes the overall score go up, anything in the red makes it go down, and the meh makes it go to the mill. You can also reuse emotes and kind of doubles up on them. So Combo Meal gave it a turd. Did not like it. Lumen says, I feel like we need negative versions of slicing and dicing. Well, that's kind of the navel gazing. You just started arguments for argument's sake. Cutting up terms pointlessly, yeah. Vipers gave it a nay, poop, and a grapes. Combo gave it a nay, also with the poop. Sockno gave it a nay, poop, and grapes. Yeah, I mean, Magnificent gave it a frank and a nay, poop, and grapes. So I'm sensing a pattern here. Luminance gave it a scream, navel gazing, poop, grapes, and a meh. Yeah, I mean, I understand, like, this is sort of like existential, saying, how do we exist in the world? I understand the most emotes you've ever used. Yeah, you know what the funny thing is? This is a complicated paper. It really is. It touched on a lot of stuff. Not to its benefit, I don't think. It really just was a little bit rambly and tried to bite off a lot more than it can chew. Frank says it's almost dance, almost navel, but neither quite seems right. Yeah, so again, it has to hit whatever level you want. But, like, you know, I'm going to give it a nog scream, actually, for the existential stuff. I'm also going to give it some grapes. I'm going to give it grapes because... Do I want one or two grapes? Because, like, they made their point, but, like, I think it was actually... I think you guys are right. This was actually more turd. Like, they argued fancily, like, being fancy, but it wasn't a good argument. They just sort of hitched the argument to Heidegger. Like, and it's like, okay, we're going to do all this fancy metaphysics, but, like, I'm going to say it's, like, inherently a priori, like Heidegger says, and that makes it okay. But they did no justification there. So they, like, did all this, like, sort of Augustinian philosophy. They did all this Heideggerian stuff, and then they're just saying, but it's by definition. Vitamin said, mind too much of your dad? That doesn't sound good. Luminous says, I'm interested in the Husserl Marian stuff, but I guess I feel like it just sort of suggested something without really supporting it at all. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I felt about it too. And it's like, yeah, Globus gave it a poop and a grapes. Thank you, Globus, for the rating. And the question is, do I want to give it anything else? Yeah, not sure. I mean, this wasn't the worst paper ever. I'm going to give it a vote. I'm kind of with Luminance here. I'll give it a vote meh, even though I'm doubling up on the turds. Like, it's not like a straight, like, shitty bit of philosophy. They put a bunch of work into this. I just don't like what they did in some sense. But, like, what they did, they kind of did well. I just think what they did was bad. It's like the old thing. I have a Matt Groening comics, old ones, like the guy who did The Simpsons. And in one of it, he was like describing his like experience in school. They're like, "What you do tolerably well, Mr. Groening." The question is why? Like, why do you think this is a good thing to do? It's like, yeah, what this person did, they did well. I just don't think it was a good idea. Yeah. Miro says, isn't philosophy of religion increasingly in interest as of late? It may be. I don't know what the sociology like in the world is at the moment, Miro. Like, I wouldn't be surprised. It's not a bad topic. But, like, these things come and go. Frank says, I think he had a definition of love in mind that was built out of God's love, and loving someone means caring as God might towards someone. I can't say exactly because they didn't bother to say it explicitly. I completely think that's what's going on here, Frank. They were taking the Augustinian kind of love between you and God and trying to make it non-religious. Doga says, papers that I don't like are better than papers that are boring or lazy. I like to have a conversation with the author. Yeah, like that's, I think Frank said the similar thing earlier. It gave some ideas to think about. Like I said, what this person's doing, they're good at what they do. I just don't like what they're doing here. But like, that doesn't mean it's bad. It means it's like, maybe if you're in this tradition, this would be kind of interesting stuff.